Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 6, Episode 18, The Jimmy. Hi everyone. It's good to be back behind the microphone. Thank you for your patience. I did take a couple of weeks off. I had some travel to Michigan, which, well, I'll get into that in a little bit. But most importantly, this is my 100th episode of Hot and Heavy. And I sort of can't believe it. I'm really excited to get to this point in the podcast. And I hope that all of you have enjoyed listening for 99 episodes and into this 100th one. And I'm just really proud of putting this show on. And I think, like anything, you evolve with any project and you grow and you improve. And I definitely think I've done that with this podcast. I always, give it my all every week and hope to put out something entertaining and thoughtful and, something that might make you giggle a little bit, remind you of just how amazing our JLD is, how amazing Elaine is, and Seinfeld in general. Nostalgia is pretty powerful. So I think, for a lot of us out there going through this series, which may be your favorite series or one of your favorites, or just brings back memories of a younger time in your life, I think there's value in that. And I'm so happy to hopefully be a small part of that for you every single week. So woohoo, 100 episodes. Feels good. Okay. Well, I did travel. I went to Detroit, or I guess I should just say Michigan. I didn't really set foot in Detroit. It's what you say when you're going to the Detroit area. It does sound cooler. Detroit's pretty fucking cool. So, I'm proud to say that, but yeah, in reality, I was in the suburbs of Detroit, and for a few days I was in Saginaw, Michigan, which is in sort of the middle of the mitten. For those of you who have seen or do the holding up the right hand to show where you are in Michigan. I grew up doing that, and I think it's charming. I actually love when people are like, oh, this is where I am. And for those of you who can't see me, which is 100% of you, I am holding up my right hand and kind of pointing at the area where I was for my 10-day trip to Michigan. And we had some fun events. We had a wedding celebration to go to. An old colleague of mine who I worked with at a couple of different companies, he got married, and he was sort of my buddy who I was really hoping, I did the annoying thing that married people do where you're like, I just really want them to settle down, even though it's none of your business and it really doesn't affect your life at all. But, you love people and you love your friends and you want them to find their partner. And, I guess it doesn't matter if you marry that person that you find, but I'm super happy for my friend who found an amazing partner and they got married in a really small ceremony. And so this event that we attended, I took my kids. And we went to a wedding celebration, and it was sort of like the reception, I guess, for lack of a better term, but it was incredible. It was like the best party I have ever been to. It was really elaborate, but also like just every corner I turned in this house. It was at the bride's parents' house, and they have this gorgeous kind of huge, I can't really say anything else except it's a mansion. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. And so a beautiful mansion with a lot of property. They had, I want to say, over 350 people there. food was fantastic. There was entertainment. There were aerialists outside performing. They had a whole casino set up. This is all in the house. Um, they had fortune tellers and palm readers, because why not? They had an entire room of desserts, just desserts. I mean, it was incredible. Really, really fun event. And most importantly, I could see the sheer joy of my friend, my dear friend, who took a long time. Well, I shouldn't say that. Well, okay. Well, it's taken as long as I've known him, and I met him in 2009. And it's taken him, this long to find his special person and get married. And it was just a great event. So, so happy for him. The rest of the trip was a lot of family time, which was fantastic. My in-laws are in Saginaw, which is where I took the kids for a few days. And then it was back to the Detroit area where my nephew had his graduation party. He is attending the University of Michigan this fall. And it was just so special. We had family come in from out of town. The night before, actually, my sister-in-law had her birthday party at a really great Mexican restaurant. And it was just like, it was one of those trips that really, really kind of reconnected not only myself, but my kids with cousins and extended family and friends. And so it was just so special on so many levels. Trying to stay on the positive here, but part of the trip was stressful as well. I mean, I think a lot of you can relate out there. Family can be stressful. And unfortunately, my father-in-law is a stressful person to be around. And I think I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone when it comes to having that family member who just, doesn't have the same beliefs, doesn't really share in kind of the mutual respect pact I feel like we should have as a human race. And it was tough. I mean, because now my kids are older and he just doesn't know how to handle that. Before it was very easy for him to be entertaining to them. Oh, let's take him to the toy store. But as they get older, it's like they don't play with toys anymore. It's more about devices and maybe conversation. It's a different world as children get older. And so it was a little bit tough, especially because my mother-in-law is fantastic and just so loving. She's just so excited whenever we're there. We play games, board games, air hockey. They have a table in their basement. I mean, super fun. She cooks and bakes for us. And the kids love it. But it's a package deal. My father-in-law is there as well, and we have to deal with a lot of inappropriate, insulting, and offensive comments. And that's not me being sensitive. Believe me, they are universally just insulting and disrespectful things he says to, mostly me. And, under the guise of, I'm teasing you. Oh, really? Are you teasing me? Because I don't think it should be that venomous when you tease someone, unless you really hate them, which I'm beginning to think you might. But also, I have a 12-year-old daughter who is hearing everything he is saying, a lot of sexist comments, a lot of really inappropriate things about women's bodies. And it was a lot. But, everything's a learning experience. Honestly, my kids and I had some really great discussions after our visit with them. And if anything, you just use it as an example of how not to act and why we don't act that way. And also, giving grandpa some grace and saying, hey, he's never really done anything or exposed himself to experiences that are outside his comfort zone. And this is what can happen. You become extremely bitter and angry and closed-minded. So that's why it's important. That's why me and your dad are trying to raise you to experience a lot of things, different cultures, expose yourself to things outside your comfort zone, because you don't want to end up spouting off at the mouth and saying really disrespectful things to your family. All right. That's enough of that. I just had to vent a little bit. It's been a couple weeks now since we got back. And still, I just, those experiences and those words really cut deep sometimes. And it's such a struggle. And I don't think I'm saying anything new for a lot of you out there, but love can be complicated. Family can be so complicated. You can really treasure so many things about a loved one and really hate a lot of things about their personality. And that's where I am kind of with my father-in-law. It's been a struggle. I've known the man for 20 years and I can't even scratch the surface of how many times he's said things that have upset me and stressed me out. And I've always had to be the bigger person and bite my tongue, while arguably someone who's older and should know better should just have better manners. But you know what? You take the high road and you learn what you can. All right, let's get into this episode. The 100th episode of Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. Yay! All right, the synopsis for the Jimmy is as follows. Elaine unwittingly makes a date with a guy at her health club who refers to himself in the third person. Circumstantial evidence leads George to becoming a leading suspect when some equipment is stolen from the Yankees. Jerry is worried that he was sexually violated while under sedation during his appointment at an adults-only dental office. Kramer gets to meet Mel Torme after an anesthetic causes Kramer to appear mentally challenged. This episode was written by Greg Cavett and Andy Robin. Okay, we start out in the locker room of the health club, and the guys have just played basketball. George is going on and on about this guy that they played with and how good he was. Oh my gosh, he could dunk and he was my height, which that's not possible. He says, what was his name again? And Jerry's like, Jimmy. How could you forget? He kept referring to himself in the third person. George is like, you're just mad because we beat you. And Kramer blames himself for the loss. He says, this stays with me, Jerry. Jimmy enters, and George is excited to see him. Great game, Jimmy. Oh, yeah. Jimmy played pretty great, he says. Kramer asks about Jimmy's shoes, and he explains that they're his training shoes. They strengthen his legs. Yeah, Jimmy couldn't jump at all before these shoes. Jimmy was kind of like you, referring to George. Kramer's like, yeah, they're plyometric. He says this to Jerry, who could not care less. George finds out that Jimmy sells them, but he's all out right now because of his move to Manhattan. And George gives him his card and says he wants the first pair when the new shipment comes in. So Jimmy exits. Damn it. George realizes it's Tuesday. He shouldn't have worked out today. He's going to be sweating at this meeting later. Oh, what? You showered? Jerry says. It wouldn't take. He says he's like a human heat pump. And Kramer's like, we should take cold showers. Cold showers? They're for psychotics. Kramer takes them, he says. Gives him a whoosh. George exits. Kramer asks Jerry what he's doing now, and he says he has a dental appointment with Tim Watley. Kramer's like, I have a checkup on Thursday. And he says to Jerry, who's brushing his teeth, he shouldn't do that 24 hours before going to the dentist. No, Jerry says, I think you mean you shouldn't eat 24 hours before surgery. Oh, no, you got to eat before surgery. You need your strength. All right, next we're at Yankee Stadium. They are in the conference room, and Mr. Wilhelm is telling the group how someone has been stealing equipment. First, it was little things like bases and batting helmets, but 2 nights ago, they stole some big items, including all of Mr. Steinbrenner's vitamins. We see George at the meeting, and he's human heat pumping, I guess, and sweating, wiping his face with a handkerchief. Makes him look pretty suspicious, and everyone's just staring at him. Next, we're at Dr. Watley's office. Jerry is told by the receptionist he's got to wait a few minutes. And he sits down and sees a Penthouse magazine on the table. And he also sees a dude perusing one, and he's so grossed out. The actress in this scene who plays the receptionist is Elaine Carter, and she is a model and actress. And she was hired for this episode because she had posed nude. She was a nude model. So when they were casting this episode, apparently for Tim Watley's office, they wanted actresses with nude modeling experience due to a plot point that ended up being deleted, which was that Kramer finds a penthouse spread with a model that resembles Tim Watley's assistant later. So it was just one of those things that they decided, okay, everyone who works in Tim Watley's office was a nude model at some point. So this actress, who plays a receptionist, Elaine, was Playmate of the Month in June of 1994. And fun fact, her father was the lead singer of The Temptations, Otis Williams. And she has one line, but I think she does very well as a receptionist. All right, next we're at Jerry's apartment. Elaine is on the phone thanking Mr. Pitt, and then she hangs up and asks Jerry if he wants to go with her to see the Velvet Fog. Jerry's confused. She explains it's Mel Torme. That's his nickname. What the hell is a Velvet Fog? Well, do you want to go or not? He's performing at this AMCA benefit. And before Jerry can ask what that is, able mentally challenged adults. And Jerry says, I can't watch a man sing a song. Elaine says, what are you, crazy? Oh, they get all emotional. They sway. It's embarrassing. This is a side note. This is such a stupid thing to say, but it still cracks me up. It's just so Jerry. Like, what? Elaine wonders, well, who is she going to go with for a date? Oh, she asks Jerry if he knows the guy at the gym who's always on the exercycle. He's really good looking. And Jerry's like, I really don't pay attention to men's faces. You can't find beauty in a man? No, he says. I find them repugnant and unappealing. Kramer enters and Jerry motions to him to wit. What? Kramer asks. Elaine and I were just discussing if I could admit a man is attractive. And then Kramer admits he's always thought George Will was attractive. Very clean cut and shampooed. Elaine's like, well, he's smart. No, I don't find him all that bright. For those of you who don't know, George Will was a journalist, and I remember him just crystal clear. His image is in my brain because my dad, who was a news junkie, I believe that George Will appeared on Meet the Press when David Brinkley was the host. I just have this image of all these older white dudes on this show discussing politics. And I know George Will was one of them. It's just such a funny choice for Kramer to think, oh, he's attractive, because he is. He's very clean cut. He's there's nothing complicated about his face. It's just, he's a very straightforward face, if that makes sense. But if you don't know what he looks like, Google him. Kramer asks Jerry if he has any cavities, and Jerry says just one, as he's bringing out a bag of suckers. Then he tells them how Tim has Penthouse magazines in the waiting room. Isn't that sick? Kramer's like, well, what's wrong with that? He's a doctor. He's supposed to be in a sterile environment. Well, did you take a look? Of course, Jerry says. And Kramer's looking forward to his appointment on Thursday. In fact, he might go a little early. George enters. Elaine's on her way out, but she asks George and Kramer, hey, do you guys know that guy at the health club? He's always on the exercycle. He's blonde. He's got a really handsome face. George is like, I wouldn't know. And Elaine says, just admitting a man is handsome doesn't necessarily make you a homosexual. And George says, it doesn't help. And Elaine exits. George tells the guys that he's importing a case of those training shoes with Jimmy. Jerry's like, why are you doing that? You have a job. Oh, there's a lot of money in this. Plus, Jimmy has a proven sales method. He jumps. Jimmy's got a backer. Jimmy and George are going to get rich. Would you stop it with the Jimmies? Kramer takes a food container from the fridge and asks Jerry what it is, and he says it's Kung Pao chicken. And Kramer takes a bite and has a Kramer response to it being very spicy. Kung Pao! My take on this scene, the comment to Jerry and George about finding men attractive. Again, Elaine is always that voice of reason, right? She's like, you guys are such idiots. I think it was a missed opportunity. I wish that Elaine had more of a reaction to the whole penthouse in Tim Watley's office. We never hear what she feels about it because Kramer kind of jumps in. But that's something Elaine would have an opinion on. And I just wish we could have heard that. And I wouldn't necessarily want it to be that killjoy reaction. If any of you remember those kind of categories that women typically fall into, one of them is always the killjoy, the mom, the wife. It's always like, you shouldn't do that. And I'm not even saying that that's what I'd want. Maybe she would just have some insight specifically to Tim Watley because, she dated him, which was brought up in the notes about nothing, but I'll get to that later. But yeah, here in this scene, I feel like we just deserved more of a reaction from Elaine. She would definitely have something to say about a penthouse in a doctor's waiting room or dentist waiting room. I mean, I think I'd walk out. I'd be like, what is happening here? I certainly wouldn't stick around. Even if it was porn for me, even if it was naked dudes, that wouldn't entice me at all. I'm with Jerry here where it's like, I don't want people like getting turned on in the waiting room. Like, gross. Porn should be reserved for different areas, not the waiting room of a public dental or doctor's office. All right, next we're in the health club. Elaine is stretching in front of the cute guy on the exercycle. We hear her thoughts and she's saying, "Come on, look at me. I'm stretching right in front of you." Then he looks up at her and smiles and she gets excited. Hey, a smile. She says, "One more stretch and then I'll go talk to him." But as she's stretching and closing her eyes, rolling her head around, he escapes. And when she opens her eyes, she's kind of like, whoa, where'd he go? Meanwhile, Jimmy is on the Stairmaster and he tells her, Jimmy is pretty sweet on you. She looks back thinking, oh, he's talking about the cute guy. Really? He is? Oh, yeah. Jimmy's been watching you. You're just Jimmy's type. Oh, she's getting more and more excited about her crush. He says, yeah, Jimmy's new in town. Jimmy doesn't really know anyone. Oh, well, I'd like to get to know him. Jimmy would like to get to know you. And then she thinks about the event. Do you think Jimmy likes Mel Torme? Jimmy loves the Velvet Fog. Yeah! She gets so excited. My take on this scene, I love her willing him to look at her while she's stretching. I always love when we hear that inner monologue. Oh, it's very effective. And the physicality of when she does that last stretch, opens her eyes and he's gone. I love the way she's like looking around like, what? Really funny. Her excitement when she's talking to Jimmy and that final ha at the end when he reveals that Jimmy loves the Velvet Fog. It's so fun. This is just such cute, fun, charming Elaine. She's taking charge here. She wants to go out with that cute guy and she's not waiting around for anyone to ask her out. So we love that side of Elaine. Okay, and then I was very distracted by Elaine's like footwear situation. Did she layer like 4 pairs of socks or does she have ankle weights on? You guys, let me know. Email me or message me on Instagram. What do you guys think? It's just a ridiculous amount of socks that she's wearing. If they're ankle weights, it makes more sense. But somehow I just think it's that layered socks look that I feel like by 1995 was out of fashion. Elaine's a little behind. All right, next we are in Dr. Whatley's office. It's Kramer's appointment, and he says, "Oh, you're looking sharp, Tim." I try. I mean, Bryan Cranston is just perfect. He's perfect, always perfect. I love him. Kramer mentions, "Oh, I've just been occupying myself with some of your reading material." And Kramer's going to get some Novocaine. So Dr. Whatley wants to clear a path. And you remember Mr. Thirsty. And, well, of course, Michael Richards has some fun with the little suction tube. All right, next we are back in the locker room. We see Kramer with the training shoes on. And Jerry enters. "Oh, you too with these?" "I'm on board," he says. "What did Tim say?" And Kramer says, "Well, he said I got to cut out the Skittles. Looks like he gave you some Novocaine." "Oh, I'm loaded." And Jerry wants to know, "Did you ask about the penthouse?" "Well," he says, I'm not going to do the Novocaine accent. He says, "Well, it helps his patients to relax, and he has a new policy, adults only." Adults only? Jerry's like, what the hell is going on there? Kramer loves it. You don't have to watch your language around kids. You feel you need to use a lot of obscenities when you're at the dentist? "When they pull that needle out, I let the expletives fly." Kramer leaks water out of his mouth all over the floor, and Jerry gets mad at him. "I can't hold the water," he says. Jimmy enters. He's doing some basketball moves. He's ready to play, and then he slips and falls in the water that fell out of Kramer's mouth. "Jimmy's down," he says. We have the little act break here where usually we'd go to commercial. And when we get back from that, Jimmy is on a stretcher, the EMT saying, "Oh, it's pretty bad." "Jimmy's going into shock," he says. George is so livid, so upset. "Why can't you control your drool?" "I'm doing the best I can." Jerry asks George, "Why are you so mad?" "Because if he can't jump, there goes my sneaker business." As they're wheeling Jimmy away, he yells that he's going to get back at Kramer. "Jimmy holds grudges." Kramer feels bad, "But I can't feel anything." Next, we're on the street. Kramer is walking down the street in the shoes, plyometric shoes, and he tries to hail a cab at the same time as another man. And he says to the cabbie, no, this guy's got it. Let him have it. And the man looks at Kramer and he looks at his shoes and he says, no, you take it. He'll get the next one. Kramer insists, but then he says, you know what? Let's share. That is a great idea, the man says. Then in the cab, the man introduces himself to Kramer as Arnold Deansfry. And Kramer introduces himself. Arnold says, it's very nice to meet you, Cosmo. Are you heading home? Yeah, heading home. Oh, you are really independent. Kramer's like, you're not doing too bad yourself. Next, we're at a sports store. It looks like a Foot Locker. And George is trying to do the sales pitch by himself because Jimmy couldn't be there. And he tries the jump and barely gets off the ground. And the guys just all walk away. Next, we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer is exclaiming, he's so excited, the velvet fog. Jerry's like, what about the velvet fog? And Elaine enters, yeah, what about the velvet fog? Kramer says he's singing at a benefit and I'm going to be sitting at his table. Elaine gets excited, says, yeah, I'm going to that. Kramer says, I'm a guest of honor. What are you talking about? So Kramer tells him the story about how he shared a cab with this guy, Arnold Deansfry. Elaine recognizes the name. Yeah, he runs the AMCA. But why are you going? Well, he hit it off and he was very impressed with what I do. What you do? You don't do anything. Well, apparently I do something because I'm sitting at the head table with Mr. Mel Torme. And then Jerry puts it all together, wearing the training shoes, drooling. Oh, Elaine understands. Oh my God, he thinks you're mentally challenged. Elaine's like, well, what's going to happen when you show up for the benefit? He's going to see that you aren't. Well, Jerry says, not necessarily. My take on this scene, there's really not much for Elaine to do in this scene. She just needed to confirm the facts of Kramer's story and, who Arnold Deansfry is and about the benefit. And that's about it. She does a great job with that. All right, next we're back at Whatley's office. Jerry is there for his filling. Tim asks Cheryl to ready the nitrous oxide and takes a hit before giving it to Jerry to put on his face. Jerry asks where Jennifer is, the other assistant. Oh, she's over at Dr. Sussman's office. They like to swap once in a while. Tim tells him to take some deep breaths and relax, and he lowers Jerry down while he and Cheryl are smiling at each other. The actress here is Allison Armitage, who plays Cheryl, and she was the Playboy Playmate of the Month in October of 1990. She's acted in many shows, including Silk Stockings, a 90s classic, and The Bold and the Beautiful. And I think she's good as Cheryl. I like that little smile and how she doesn't really say much. It's all in her presence. She did actually have some lines. I saw it in a deleted scene, and she was really good presence, really good actress. But alas, it was cut. All right, next we're at Yankee Stadium. George is in his office and he's having some Chinese food at his desk, and it's super spicy. He's like pounding on his desk and taking a sip of his Diet Coke. Then he gets a phone call from sports wholesalers, and as he's talking to them about the training shoes, it's beautiful athletic gear. Mr. Wilhelm walks in and overhears. George quickly gets off the phone when he sees Wilhelm walk in. And by this point, George is sweating from the Kung Pao chicken and just looking super suspicious, or sus, as the kids say. And Wilhelm gets in his face. So, George, have you heard anything about the missing equipment? No, George says. Wilhelm says he hates nothing more than a liar. And George agrees. You feeling all right, George? You look a little warm. And he tells him, oh, it's the Kung Pao. You're a terrible liar, George. Look at you. You're a wreck. You're sweating bullets. It's the Kung Pao. George likes his chicken spicy. We go back to Whatley's office for a really short scene. It's just Jerry groggily coming out of the gas, and he looks around. We see a blurry POV with Tim buttoning his shirt and the hygienist redoing her belt. Next, we're at Monk's. Jerry and Elaine are at a booth. Elaine suggests, well, maybe you were hallucinating you were coming out of the gas, but you were really still under the gas. No, he doubts that. They were getting dressed, and his shirt was out. Your shirt was out? What kind of shirt? Like a tennis shirt. Elaine's like, you don't tuck those in. Well, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Well, she asks, were you tucked? I think I was tucked. Well, say you were. What do you think could have happened? Jerry says, I don't know, but I was spitting out and rinsing like there was no tomorrow. Is this guy a dentist or Caligula? Elaine's got to do something here. She says, okay, so you were violated by two people while you were under the gas. So what? You're single. I'm damaged goods now, Jerry says. Join the club, Elaine says. Jerry asks for an update about the gym guy. Did you call him? Oh, yeah, Jimmy, she says. Jimmy? He can't believe it. Why? I don't know. He's so strange. Don't you notice how he always refers to himself in the third person? No. Elaine says, that's not him. That's the guy who gave me Jimmy's number. That's Jimmy, Jerry says. That's the way he talks. I'm going to see Mel Torme with him? Jimmy's going to put the moves on Elaine. George arrives and tells them that he has to see Steinbrenner because Wilhelm thinks he stole the equipment just because he was sweating from the Kung Pao when he asked him about it. Jerry doesn't know how George can eat that spicy chicken. And George's response? George likes spicy chicken. What's that? I like spicy chicken. You said George likes spicy chicken. And Elaine confirms it. You're turning into Jimmy. George can't take this. George is getting upset. My take on this scene. Now, normally I wouldn't celebrate the dismissal of a sexual violation. But in this case, in a fictional show that's a comedy, I love that they didn't make Elaine, the only female character in the principal cast, to be this nurturing presence. That's not how these friends would react. I think it's hilarious. The rationalization of you're single, it's just so wrong, but so funny. And then also in this scene, I love that moment of realization about Jimmy. It's so well played, really well delivered by JLD. I love that line read of, no. That's the guy that gave me Jimmy's number. You see her realize it slowly while she's saying that line. Really great performance. All right, next we're at the health club. Jimmy is with Elaine. He asks, what did you want to see Jimmy about? And she says, well, Jimmy, and points at him. About tonight, there's been a little misunderstanding. Jimmy doesn't like misunderstandings. Yeah, see, I thought Jimmy and misunderstandings kind of clash. Then we see Elaine kind of react to that. She seems a bit charmed. She says, I've never heard anyone talk the way you do. It's very unusual. Well, Jimmy's very unusual. Anyway, she says, when I made the date, I thought that... Then Jimmy interrupts her and points out that Hank has a new boyfriend. And who's Hank? Well, he's the cute blonde guy on the exercycle. Jimmy says how he's not threatened by Hank's sexuality. Jimmy is happy for Hank. Elaine says that she once tried to convert one. Elaine's not going to go do that again. My take on this scene, I think it's a cute scene. I like that Elaine isn't turned off, but sort of more intrigued by the third person chatting. I think that's great. Unexpected, right? As she's trying to break it off with him, he just keeps on with his third person. And yeah, I just think Elaine, it's something different, right? I think she's probably dated a lot of guys who are the same. She's with her idiot friends all the time. So, hey, why not try something with a different guy who speaks in the third person? It's something that she hasn't seen before. And I also like the nice callback to the beard episode. All right, next we are at the benefit. Elaine and Kramer are standing together in line to get in, and Kramer goes off to get some candy for both of them. Jimmy arrives. Elaine got a new dress, she says. Jimmy likes it. And Jimmy's on crutches, of course, because of his fall. And Kramer comes back. He says, there's no candy around here. Oh, hey, Jimmy. Uh-oh. Jimmy gets enraged. Look who's here. The guy who sidelined Jimmy. He took the bread out of Jimmy's mouth. And so he punches Kramer. His security gets in the way and takes Jimmy away. Don't touch Jimmy. Elaine helps Kramer to his feet. Are you okay? Is my lip swollen? He says. Of course, the punch has swollen his lip up. Then we're inside the benefit, and Kramer is sitting at Mel Torme's table, and now his speech is all impeded because of the swollen lip. Says he's been living by himself for a long time now. And Mel Torme says, well, I think that's the tops, and gives him a thumbs up. My take on this scene, again, not much to Elaine's portion, but I do like that she wants candy. What kind? I don't care. She just wants any kind of candy. I just think that's cute. And I like her delivery of Elaine got a new dress. Very cute. She's all in with the Jimmy. All right, next we're at Yankee Stadium. George enters. Sorry, I just don't love the scene. George enters Steinbrenner's office. Steinbrenner starts in on how disappointed he is in George for pilfering the equipment. So George starts speaking in the third person, which confuses George Steinbrenner. And that just derails him enough to go on a rant. And George is in the clear and exits. All right, next we're back at the benefit. Mel Torme dedicates the next song he's going to sing to his courageous friend. And he looks at Kramer. He starts singing When You're Smiling and looking at Kramer as he's singing. And Kramer is having such a great time. And Kramer sings along with him. There's also a tag to the episode. We are on the street. We see Kramer come out of a shop and he has a penthouse with him. And he starts reading from the forum section. And it's a letter from a dentist describing how he and his hygienist decided to have a little fun with one of his patients while he was under the gas. And of course, Jerry is like, oh, shit. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Clear blue skies, bright sunshine, radiant pastures of brightly colored flowers, picturesque trees, multicolored leaves and blooms. Ew! For many of us, color is really overrated. We like to keep it simple, comfortable, and gray. Introducing a new clothing line for the anti-vibrant population, the Velvet Fog. Finally, attire for us who never stray from the gray, who land in the bland, and are jolly in melancholy. The Velvet Fog collection offers over 64 gray tones to choose from, and every piece is made from the softest velvet. Just because you want to blend in with the rain clouds doesn't mean giving up on luxury. Our velvet is handmade, and all of the gray dyes are hand mixed in the gray state of Washington. In addition to our overcast location, every seamstress at the Velvet Fog smokes heavily and moisturizes regularly, so their skin is as gray and soft as the beautiful clothing they make. Visit our website, .gray, and find your depressing wardrobe today. For a limited time, you will receive an 8x10 charcoal drawing of Mel Torme. He's got a great voice. The Velvet Fog, looking sad, never felt so soft. And we're back. In the notes about nothing, they revealed some deleted dialogue where Jerry asks about Tim Whatley. So when Jerry's horrified about perhaps being violated when he was under the gas, he asks Elaine, well, you went out with him. Did he exhibit any of these kinds of proclivities? And Elaine informs him that Whatley had a 3/4 sleeve silk robe. What? I love the inquiry, but the response is so stupid. I can see why they deleted it, but man, that could have been a much better conversation. Now, to address I don't want you guys to think I'm not going to address the peak cringe moment of this series, which is Kramer being mistaken for a mentally challenged adult, and then that end scene of him embodying, I guess, what you would stereotypically think of as mentally challenged physicality and the way he was speaking and singing. I certainly don't condone any of that as being funny. I think it's, again, we're in 2023. This was in 1995 when that sort of scene and storyline, they say it in the notes about nothing, it elicited the longest, most sustained audience laughter of the season, of the series. But it's a different world today, and it's certainly cringy, and as it should be. But they did mention in the notes about nothing that they were prepared to get a lot of hate mail for this episode, so they knew it was offensive going in. But again, different time. They They said, hey, we're willing to just, punch down to this community in order to get the laughs. But apparently they didn't get any hate mail, and they did get a letter from a mentally challenged boy who said that he loved the episode. So I think that validated something that, I don't know, probably, again, it's hard to comment on things when it was such a different time, but I really hope that today they sort of regret that. It's pretty offensive what happens at the end of this episode. And now, speaking of offensive, it's time for Greg's sack lunch. I'm totally kidding, Greg. You're not offensive. It was just a dumb segue I tried out. And, you take a risk, and it really didn't make any sense because Greg is our most dedicated contributor to this podcast, and he's not at all offensive. In fact, all of his comments are enjoyable and insightful. So let's get into Greg's sack lunch. The first thing I see are his favorite scene and Elaine moments. Greg says, okay. Okay, for those of you who may not know, I don't read Greg's thoughts until I'm literally recording, sitting here in my closet recording. So the reason I started laughing is because this is the first time I'm seeing this. And this is how Greg wrote his thoughts. He says, Greg likes this episode. Greg likes it a lot. Greg thinks Jimmy is a hilarious character, and Greg loves how all of the characters interact with him throughout this episode. And also how we get some scenes at Yankee Stadium, Tim Whatley, and a guest appearance by Mel Torme. Greg thinks there's a lot going on in this episode, but it all weaves together pretty well. All right, enough of that. It's obnoxious. Thank you, Greg. But I did enjoy it for those few sentences. Greg goes on to say, one of my favorite Elaine moments is when she is stretching desperately in front of the guy at the gym that she's crushing on. It makes me laugh every time. Something about her inner monologue of, look at me, while there are like 3 people in this tiny room is such a funny visual because she is literally sticking her hands right in his face. Yeah, there's nothing subtle about Elaine's stretching here. She's literally trying to grab his face or grab his gaze, I guess. Next, Greg says, another great moment is in the diner when she's talking with Jerry about his possible violation by Tim Whatley. I like how she says, so you were violated. So what? You're single. This is so wrong. And I can't tell if she's serious or being sarcastic, but it's just so the opposite of how anyone would feel. Yeah, I talked about this a little bit, but I just love that it's an unexpected response and that it comes from Elaine. I think if this was a conversation with George might have been like, well, I mean, was the woman hot? Like, he would kind of get into the nitty gritty about, I think he would only be offended or feel for Jerry if like the woman was not attractive or something. He's like, what is a beautiful woman? She got to feel you up. I don't know. But no, it's perfect that it's Elaine. And yeah, that reaction, that unexpected response, it just makes for such a funny moment. All right, next in Greg's sack is his scene swap. He says, I don't know about any particular scene swaps, but I wish there was a way we could have gotten Elaine involved a little bit more beyond being Jerry's sounding board the entire episode. Her storyline with Jimmy is fairly brief, and I would have actually wanted her more involved with the Tim Whatley story since she was romantically linked to him previously. She should want to know if she dodged a bullet with this creep, but it never even comes up that she really knows Tim. Exactly. I think that's the inherent flaw with this episode. Not only would she have an opinion about just penthouses in a waiting room, but Tim Whatley's waiting room. There's a history there with the two of them. So yeah, I really do think there was something that could have been mined from that kind of history of Elaine and Tim Whatley together. Greg also says another missed opportunity for a callback is at the event when Kramer asks Elaine if she wants any candy, if he can find some. How hard would it have been for her to say juji fruit here? Oh my God, totally. I was more focused on the fact that I loved that she was like, I don't care. Like, I just love that Elaine's like, give me candy, whatever you can find. But yeah, juji fruit, that would have been a great callback. I agree, Greg. Definitely a missed opportunity. The last thing I find in Greg's sack are his other thoughts. He says, would this episode fly nowadays, specifically Kramer being mistaken for someone mentally challenged? I'm thinking not. While the premise of it is funny and the weird shoes and the drooling sell the point, I think we could have done without whatever Rain Man voice Michael Richards was doing there. Another thing I want to bring up is Tim Watley having Penthouse magazine in his waiting room. The obvious question is never asked. Does he not have children patients? Also, what is up with Tim? Was he getting it on with the nurse? Do we really think they were doing something incorporating Jerry? He's never seemed downright sleazy before, but he plays it so well, I think he might be. Let me get through your thoughts here. No, this episode would not fly nowadays. Absolutely not, nor should it. This is a punching down humor that I am not a fan of. I remember even being, I probably didn't cringe as much as I do now. Back in 1995, it was one of those you shake your head like, oh my God, this is terrible, but ha ha ha. No, it would not fly nowadays. It would, talk about the speed with which it would be canceled would rival a Formula One race. I don't know why I made a reference to something I know nothing about, but suffice it to say, it would be very fast and swift, the cancellation of Seinfeld. If they did this today, it's cringy and a good example to say, hey, this is what we should not do anymore. There are plenty of other funny things we can do without insulting mentally challenged people. Okay, so you said, does he not have children patients? Well, Kramer does say he's got that policy of no kids, only adults. So I think that answers that question. And then those questions you have that are unanswered. Yeah, I think he's getting it on with the nurse. He's kind of sleazy. He gets sleazier as the time goes on, especially, his Studio 54 with the menorah Hanukkah party, how shallow he is with Jerry's two-faced girlfriend. Yeah, I think, Elaine definitely dodged a bullet there. I do think Tim Watley is a sleaze bucket, but played very well and very convincingly by the great Bryan Cranston. Thank you so much, Greg. Not offensive at all. We look forward to more thoughts from you. And in the meantime, I am going to close Greg's sack lunch. And now for a segment I like to call, And What is the Comment? We have an audio clip from listener Kenny. Now, I've mentioned Kenny before. He has shared some of his thoughts in previous episodes, and he was so kind to send in an audio clip about his, a personal experience he's had with a very featured product of this episode. So let's go ahead and listen to Kenny's clip.
Kenny's getting upset. I'm all caught up on episodes, and the delicate genius is on vacation. I'm just kidding. Just want to say I really enjoy any excuse to watch Seinfeld, and your podcast has been a great way to experience the show in a different light. And as far as the next episode, my dad bought us similar shoes to what Jimmy and George were selling, but I was like George and had the same experience. Even though I used them more than any of my brothers, and I did weightlifting and all these plyometrics, I had the worst vertical leap. So go figure.
Oh, wow. I love that so much. I still find it hard to believe that those shoes actually exist. They're so ugly. And I can't imagine people actually walking around in those shoes just being like, yeah, I got to strengthen my legs, man. How funny. But Kenny, oh my gosh, pictures or it didn't happen. I don't know. Do you have any photos of you, little Kenny in these shoes? I need to see it. I need a visual. I'll even take maybe your brothers in the shoes. But, oh man, I feel for you. I wish they would have worked better. At any rate, I don't know if this will make you feel better, but they didn't hurt your dancing skills because we've danced together many times at our dance jam class at Lifetime Fitness. And I would have never guessed your vertical was not very high and that those plyometric shoes didn't do the trick for your athletic prowess. You've always looked very fit, very athletic. So you know what? They just weren't meant for you. Just because they worked for Jimmy and Jimmy loves them and Jimmy couldn't jump beforehand, that doesn't mean anything. Thank you so much, Kenny, for sharing that. And please keep them coming. If any of you would like to contribute, please follow Hot and Heavy on TikTok and you will be notified when it's time to send in some thoughts. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. I really love that moment of just saying to, well, all of them, but specifically George, these idiots, that just because you admit a man is handsome, that doesn't necessarily make you a homosexual. Because it had to be said. Like, give me a fucking break, guys. You can see, if a man is attractive or not. Okay. And I also love her delivery. A close second is her velvet fog. I love that line read. I think it's so funny when she gets off the phone and asks Jerry if he wants to go with her. And my final notes about this episode. I do like Elaine's plot here. The whole dating Jimmy weaves her into the other storylines of the episode. All of them touch Jimmy in this episode. Maybe not in the same way that Jerry is touched in that dental chair, but you know what I'm saying. I do wish there was more Elaine and George interaction. I think it would have been really fun if they kind of fought for Jimmy's attention. George gets a little possessive of Jimmy because of the business, and then Elaine starts dating him. I don't know. I think there could have been something fun there, a little push and pull. But overall, it's a fun episode, but an episode that has peak cringe moments for the series. A little complicated, a little mixed bag about my feelings about this episode, but that's just how it is. Like I was talking about with my father-in-law, it's a mixed bag of emotions. So, I'm just going to dovetail my experience with my father-in-law with this episode. It's all about the dovetailing, right? And I think that's all I can say about the Jimmy in this 100th episode of Hot and Heavy. Please be sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. I can't believe it's 100 episodes. Such a great feeling. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will see you next time.